Barakatha Yahweh, Barakatha Yahushai, Barakatha Yahweh, Barakatha Yahushai, Barakatha Yahweh, Barakatha Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, which you well. I want to say salutations to the hopeful elect out there. You Akim to Sadakim that do this thing in the utmost truth and sincerity. On the pre-Shaman, this week's in transit lesson is going to be entitled Escape from New York / Escape from LA. Two things inspiring the lesson. Of course, what's been going on in New York and California, the mass exodus of the upper middle class, and the riots, and that movie Escape from New York and Escape from LA with Kurt Russell, and pretty much what's been happening with these presidential debates going on. You have the elites fighting amongst each other and doing different tactics. They're trying to upset each other. One of the main tactics is being done right now is this lockdown situation, mainly happening in blue states, if you will, Democratic states, just as New York, California, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Within Pennsylvania, you have Philadelphia, which they're rioting to sort of, they want this guy out of there. They want Trump out of there, right? I'll tell you something about lockdowns. You can't have a riot. You can't invade a store unless there's a lockdown. So that's done by design. You can't go on with a gang of people and riot unless the place is locked down and you have a mask over your face. So these things are being orchestrated. The lockdowns, they incentivizing people to go out there and rob, loot. It has nothing to do with Black Lives Matters. In Philadelphia, a black-owned business was looted entirely. All right. It's to largen the gap between the wealthy and the poor. All right. Biden has this tax plan to increase taxes on those making $400,000 or more. Again, targeting that upper middle class, right? And in the grand scheme of things, what they're doing is something the so-called Jews been doing, right? You devalue something to buy it back dirt cheap. A prime example, you look at the let's use Harlem, for example. Harlem in the 80s, during the crack epidemic, things were dirt cheap because nobody wanted to live in Harlem, done by design. You bring violence in there, and the same thing they did in Jersey City as well. You bring violence in there, bring down the market value of a whole zip code, right? Because this devil don't want just one building, or they want they want to buy wholesale. So you bring down the value of that particular zip code, and a few years later, you bring the value back up. How do you bring the value back up? By gentrification and increasing the market price of things around you, whether it be the stores and the cost of living, right? Poor income families can't live there, less chance of violence. They do the same. They're doing the same strategies with these smaller businesses, right? You have these major corporations that want to monopolize, whether it's food, want to monopolize the retail sector. They're in favor of lockdowns. Why? Because that starves out the small businesses, and you buy up their assets at dirt cheap prices. This dude, Warren Buffett, right? He wanted to. They said that his company that's responsible for making bricks were placed there to, of course, cause destruction, right? So what's happening is you see an exodus from California to New York, which is going to cause prices to go down. And you have to bring the scriptures always full circle. Revelations, the 3rd chapter and the 16th verse. No, pardon me. Revelations, the 13th chapter and the 16th verse, going into the mark of the beast. One thing to take away from that is it says rich and poor, right? So there's no middle. They want to get rid of a middle, all right? They just want rich and poor, kings and serfs. And in doing Lyft and this different rideshare, I interact with people, using the Clark Kent mode that we have, right? And a lot of Edomites are migrating out of here. I'm in New York, and they're moving to places where one Edomite said they just don't feel safe. That was their words. We don't feel safe at night. He was saying that about him and his woman. He was like a doctor, doesn't feel safe in Brooklyn. The violence is intensifying here in the Bronx and Brooklyn, different boroughs. So-called Jew, Amalek, he's bringing back gang violence. Now, gang violence sort of died down when Amalek's wanted to die down. Now with this new music and banging on chos and banging on woos, and we know who runs the media, right? So they're trying to bring that back up, all right, again, to make it very hard to live certain places, bring the value back down, and in doing so, kill a lot of Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, because the 2/3 are very destructive. You know, they love to destroy themselves, going back to the curses. You know, the Lord, 2/3 of our people told the Lord, you know, let his blood be upon our heads. So a lot of times when you see these jakes getting mowed down, they're killing each other in gang violence, you gotta see it from, you know, can't really get too emotional. You know, you gotta see that they brought this destruction upon themselves. You know? And if the world had, when I say the world, the cosmos, if Israel had this truth, they wouldn't be behaving how they're behaving. So this is the Most High doing. The Most High is preparing them for the slaughter. All right, and going back with the whole topic of them fighting against each other, you have you know, guys like, because the book of Isaiah tells us that the Egyptians are going to fight against the Egyptians, the modern day Egyptians, as a so-called white man, right? This is modern day Egypt. Revelations 11:8 tells us that their dead bodies, being dead from the neck up, really. Proverbs the 24th chapter. The man that wandereth out of the way of understanding shall be in the congregation of the dead, roughly paraphrasing. So we're pretty much dead to who we are. We're dead to our nationality. And that's here in Egypt, this place of bondage where the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans are unified as a tribe in captivity. Okay, that only happened in Egypt, and it only happened in the reincarnated Egypt. It didn't happen in Babylon, and it didn't happen under the Syrians, right? Now, the Egyptians going against the Egyptians, I want to make this point, is you have very rich Amalekites, Zionists, that are warring with each other. Prime example, we were talking about this in the chat, big tech, right? These big tech companies like Facebook, Google, Twitter, they're anti-Trump, right? So they're going to put out things in contrary to having this guy win. And if you look at guys like Rupert Murdoch, let's use him, a prime example, a so-called Jew. If you brothers have the time, you can look this up. You can type in Sky News Australia, right? And you'll see that it's more pro-Trump stuff, and it exposes the Biden crime family, right? So does Fox News, because that's all run by Rupert Murdoch. The New York Post here in London Times. He also owns Sky News and a company in Australia. So he's a Amalekite Zionist, right? But he's also going against the people that are Biden's handlers, right? That are also so-called Jews. So these Amalekites, these different elite families, are going against each other, and they show you this in the Netflix series. House of Cards. You know, so this political game that they're playing within themselves to vie for power, and using these puppets by the way of lobbying, right? They do something called lobbying, which is they endorse these different politicians to sign off on political agendas that fit their motives and profit them, right? The scriptures in Isaiah 10:1 tells us the wickedness that they prescribe, that they put together. But in them fighting, really, that's the Most High being the ultimate puppet master, all right? Because the scriptures in the book of Amos, the 4th chapter and the 13th verse, tells us the Most High puts the thought inside of man. The same thing is said in the book of Proverbs 16:1, and then there's another one in Proverbs says the king's heart is in the hands of the Lord. So the riots that are being organized and created, all right, COVID-19 is not about health, okay, because there's far more things deadly than COVID-19 that was prohibited here, such as pharmaceutical drugs that could cause suicide, cigarettes, even automobiles, right? There's like 4,000 people on average that die in accidents per month. So this, you know, there's way more deadly things than COVID. So this is not about our health, all right? Again, this is a political wealth infighting that's going on, you know, which all roads point to what the apostles, the elders, and the brothers of Great Millstone have been talking about, which is the RFID microchip. They've made vaccines mandatory in the past before. I believe 6 times they did it, you know, last time I checked. But this particular vaccine, They could do things like, not make you operate your business without this vaccine, not make you travel without this vaccine, not make you buy and sell without this vaccine, sort of like they did with the mask. I've been listening to both sides. Trump is saying he's gonna do therapeutics, but the way Trump markets the vaccine, he makes it seem like a good thing, and his people cheer. And when Biden pushes the vaccine, he pushes it like almost like a fearful thing, but the Democrats still cheer. But you see, they're both in accordance with this mandatory vaccine. So the presidential elections is in less than a week. There's a lot of fear and uncertainty. You see it. You see it in the people. But this type of stuff excites us because this is all Matthew's the 24th chapter happening. All right, and every day further is prophecies being fulfilled. As you can see, Governor Cuomo plans to tighten restrictions on individuals coming in and out of New York. And that also makes you think of what? One shall desire to go into a city, and that should not be able to. So prophecies are happening right before our faces. All right? The upper middle class are getting nervous. And, Esau is protesting because he's seeing his kingdom being yanked right in front of him. He's seeing the downfall of it happening. He's trying to fight back. But we're just going to keep doing our jobs as prophets and break down what's happening through the scriptures. That was a quick in transit. I'm going to give all praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushua, Ba'ashem Rakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, which you well. Salutations to the hopeful elect out there. You Akim to Zadakim that do this thing in the most truth and sincerity. Shalom.